A pleasant day, Prof. Falcon. I am Catherine Marino, and together with Mr. Adrian Taller and Mr. Earl Miguel de la Cruz, we are going to tackle about Sierra Leone's growth development. First and foremost, Mr. Adrian Taller will provide you with some background knowledge about Sierra Leone.
Next slide, please. Country profile of Sierra Leone. Brief history. Sierra Leone is a Western African country. The country was named after Pedro de Cintra, a Portuguese explorer who was the first European to see and map Freetown Harbor in 15th century. Sierra Leila, or Lion Mountain, was the original Portuguese name for the hills that surround the harbor. Freetown, the capital, has one of the world's largest natural harbors. Sierra Leone is a mining center despite the fact that the majority of the population is engaged in the subsistence agriculture. Diamonds, gold, bauxite, and rutile are all found on its property titanium dioxide. From the late 1980s onwards, the country was plagued by internal conflict, culminating in a devastating civil war that lasted from 1991 to 2002. Sierra Leone's administration has done a difficult job to reconstructing the country's physical and social infrastructure while nurturing reconciliation since the end of the war. Sierra Leone gained its independence on April 27, 1961, and Republican status on April 9, 1971. Many developments have occurred in the social, political, and economic sphere since independence. The war in Sierra Leone was officially declared ended on January 18, 2002. For my explanation in British history, the name Sierra Leone dates back to 1462 when a Portuguese explorer sailed down the coast of West Africa. There's been some dispute whether it was the shape of climatic conditions that influenced Pedro da Sintra to come up with Sierra Leone, Sierra Leila, meaning the Lion Mountains. Some say the coastal regions look like lion teeth. Others suggest he thought the thunderstorms over the mountainous peninsula sounded like the roar of a lion. 16th century English sailors called it Sierra Leone, which evolved in the 17th century to Sierra Leone. The British officially adopted the name Sierra Leone in 1987. Leadership: Siaka Stevens, born August 24, 1905, in Muyamba, Sierra Leone, died May 29, 1988, in Freetown. Sierra Leonean Prime Minister 1957 and 1958 to 1971, and President 1971 to 1985, who survived in office despite attempted coup, a burdensome national debt, and almost continual charges of gross mismanagement and governmental corruption. Stevens was a police officer, mine worker, and railway station master before founding the United Mine Workers Union, 1943. He studied industrial relations at Ruskin College, Oxford, 1947 to 1948, and represented the Sierra Leone People's Party in the Protectorate Assembly, becoming Minister of Lands, Mines and Labor, 1952. After serving as deputy leader of the breakaway People's National Party, 1958 to 1960, he formed his own All of People's Congress (APC) in 1960 and was opposition leader from 1961, the year that Sierra Leone achieved independence from Britain, until the APC won the 1967 election. Stephen was overthrown in a military coup in the 1967, only days after being sworn in as prime minister, but he was recalled from the exile in Guinea after another coup 13 months later. He requested troops from Guinea to quell the protests surrounding his installation as executive president in 1971. And In 1978, he declared Sierra Leone a one-party state. He stepped down peacefully in 1985 in favor of his hand-picked successor, but in 1987 he was put under house arrest on suspicion of plotting a coup attempt. Sir Albert Malgay. Sir Albert Malgay, in full, Sir Albert Michael Malgay, born October 10, 1910, in Bangbatok, in Sierra Leone, died in December 1890 in Washington, D.C., U.S. West African politician who was Prime Minister of Sierra Leone from April 29, 1964 until March 21, 1967, when he was ousted by a military coup. Malgay was called to the bar by the Middle Temple, London, in 1947 and returned to Sierra Leone to practice law and serve in local form government. Together with his elder brother, Sir Milton Malgay, he formed the Sierra Leone People's Party in 1951. He was then elected by the Protectorate Assembly to a seat in the Legislative Council and Social Welfare. In 1967, he broke away from his brother, and the following year he founded the People's National Party with Siaka Stevens. Malgay was reconciled with his brother in 1960 and was made Minister of Finance. After Sir Milton died, Malgay succeeded him as a Minister in 1964 and was knighted in 1965. His focus on a one-party state with an executive president and his promulgation of such a constitution led to his overthrow by the army in 1967, which set up a National Reformation Council. So, Dr. Milton Malgay and his brother, I please pakibalik sa last slide. Dr. Milton Malgay and his younger brother, Albert Malgay, were the first two prime ministers in succession of independent Sierra Leone. More than a decade has passed since Albert Malgay lost the 1967 election and was overthrown by a military coup after an abortive attempt by his military commander to prop him up through the summary arrest of his victorious opponent, Siaka Stevens. For politics, Sierra Leone held general elections on March 7, 2018 to elect a new president, members of parliament and local councils in the fourth cycle of elections since the civil war in 2002. The opposition Sierra Leone People's Party (SLPP) candidate RTD Brig Julius Mada Bio won by 0.6% points, and for the first time, a winning party failed to have majority in parliament. The losing All People's Congress (APC) had 68 seats, 50%, and the SLPP had 49 seats, 37%. Two parties, the coalition for change and the National Grand Coalition, won 8 for 4 seats respectively. Officially, the Republic of Sierra Leone, the country, has its government divided into executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The country itself is broken down into 149 chiefdoms, small local units of government. The government early this year launched 3 commissions of inquiry to probe into the governance activities of the past administration, 2007 to 2018. Persons of interest include former presidents, vice presidents, ministers, deputies, and other civil and public servants. The commissions are expected to conclude hearings by the end of October, with recommendations presented to government by end of 2019. Next slide, please. Demographics. Sierra Leone population is 9,976,983. Yearly change positive 2.10%, global share 0.1%, and the global rank is 103. The population of Sierra Leone in 2018 was 7,650,150, a 2.16 increase from 2017. The population of Sierra Leone in 2019 was 7,813,215, a 2.13% increase from 2018. The population of Sierra Leone in 2020 was 7,976,983, a 2.1% increase from 2019. The current population of Sierra Leone in 2021 is 8,141,343, a 2.6% increase from 2020. As a relatively new country, the growth rate in Sierra Leone has been above average throughout its history, and the steady increase in population is still going on today, and the annual rate of change has been over 2% since around the turn of the century. The median age in Sierra Leone is 18.5 years, which is disproportionately young and makes for a very young working population. The average woman gives birth to roughly 4.5 children, and this high birth rate is the cause of substantial growth rate in the country. Next slide, please. Tour of Sierra Leone. Social customs, the Poor Society for Men and the Sunday Society for Girls play an educational role in village culture. Initiation into these societies is a rite of passage. Holidays observed in the country include the Christian celebrations of Christmas and Easter, the Muslim festival of Eid al-Fitr, which marks the end of Ramadan, Eid al-Adha, which marks the culmination of Hajj, and the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad. The Maulid, Independence Day, is celebrated on April 27th, the anniversary of Sierra Leone's becoming an independent state within the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. The arts. The most outstanding features of the country's cultural life is dancing. The internationally known Sierra Leone National Dance Troupe first won widespread acclaim at the 1955 to 1965 New York World's Fair and continues to perform in the 21st century. The different communities of the country have their own styles of costumes and dance. In addition, certain clothes societies such as the Wonde and Sande and the Gola have characteristic ceremonial dances. A wide range of agility, gracefulness, and rhythm is displayed. In addition, there are elements of symbolism in most of the dances. Drums, wooden xylophones called balafons, and various stringed instruments provide the music background. The carving of various wooden masks in human and animal figures for the dances is especially advanced in the southern region. The Sunday mask worn on the head of the chief dancer during the ceremony that welcomes the reappearance of female initiates from their period of seclusion is perhaps the best known carved figure in Sierra Leone art. It is a black, symmetrically stylized head of an African woman with an elaborately plaited pyramidal coiffure adorned with various figures with a facial expression of great dignity and beauty. The iconography is of great significance and meaning. The weaving of cloth, typically blue, brown, white, or combination of these colors, is carried out in the southern and eastern regions by the Mende and the Kono. Thread spun from the cotton bush, gossypium, is used in weaving. This hand-woven cloth is an important item of barter and wealth and is used in many ceremonies and rituals. The cloth is made onto coats for men or is worn as a wrap-around lower body garment by women and is also used as a bedspread. In the north, among the Temni, imported cotton or satin is tie-dye in beautiful patterns with indigo. The red juice of the kola nut or imported dyes in the west, baskets are made with dyed raffia and patterned slippers are fashioned from dyed wool. Next slide, please. Sports and recreation. Sierra Leone's are avid football soccer fans and prior to the civil war of the country boasted dozens of amateur and semi-professional squads that vied for national honors. Baseball and basketball are also popular, and several Sierra Leone Born athletes play professionally outside the country. Intramural competition in all these sports was brought to a standstill during the Civil War. In 1996, the national football squad reached the final rounds of the African Nations Cup after barely avoiding the forfeiture because of a lack of travel funds. In 1999, the team had to surrender its playoff spot in 2000 African National Cup because it could not safely travel to neighboring Guinea to play in qualifying match. After the end of the Civil War, efforts were made to re-establish the national football program in the country. Next slide, please. For the religion, about two-thirds of the population are Muslim, while about one-fourth are Christian. Less than one-tenth of the population practice a variety of traditional religions. However, this number does not include the many Sierra Leoneans who practice traditional religions in tandem with their professed traditional religions, professed Muslim or Christian faith. Other religions including Baha'i, Hinduism, and Judaism are practiced by a small percentage of the population. There is no official religious affiliation in Sierra Leone, but nearly everyone living there is either Muslim or Christian. About 78% of the population are Muslim, while Christians make up to 21% of the population. Although there isn't a state religion, it is common to find Christian prayers said during the beginning of political occasions. Within the Muslim population, almost all of them are of the Sunni denomination. Religion's violence is rare, and Sierra Leone is known as one of the world's most religiously tolerant nations, with Christians and Muslims regularly working together peacefully. Any civil disputes in the country were never religiously motivated. Next slide, please. For our gross domestic product, industry origin or supply approach. GDP, as for our graph, this is our graph. Sierra Leone GDP for 2017 was $3.74 billion, a 1.76% increase from 2016. Sierra Leone GDP from 2018 was $4.9 billion, a 9.24% increase from 2017. Sierra Leone GDP for 2019 was $4.12 billion, a 0.9% increase from 2018. Sierra Leone GDP for 2020 was $3.87 billion, a 6.23% decline from 2019. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Growth rate. According to the graph, Sierra Leone GDP growth rate for 2017 was 4.21%, a 1.84% decline from 2019. GDP growth rate for 2018 was 3.45%, a 70.77% decline from 2017. GDP growth rate for 2019 was 5.60%, a 2.15% increase from 2018. For 2020 was negative 2.15%, a 7.76% decline from 2019. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. GDP per capita. Sierra Leone GDP per capita for 2017 was $499, a 0.41% decline from 2016. For 2018 was $534, a 6.93% increase from 2017. For 2019 was $528, a 1.21% decline from 2018. For 2020 was $485, a 8.15% decline from 2019. The economy of Sierra Leone is driven by primary commodities, mainly agriculture and mineral production, but the size of their contribution to the GDP is shifting. Agriculture, including forestry and fisheries, still accounts for the largest GDP share, but this share is declining. Next slide, please. Develop index for the reporter Earl.
Human Development Index. Sierra Leone's HDI value for 2019 is 0.452, which puts the country in the low human development category, positioning it at 182 out of 189 countries and territories. The rank is shared with Burkina Faso between 1990 and 2019. Sierra Leone's HDI value increased from 0.287 to 0.452, an increase of 57.5%. Table are review Sierra Leone's progress in each of the HDR indicators. Between 1990 and 2019, Sierra Leone's life expectancy at birth increased by 16.1 years, mean years of schooling increased by 2.1 years, and expected years of schooling increased by 5.2 years. Sierra Leone's GNI per capita decreased by about 6.0% between 1990 and 2019. Sierra Leone's HDL for 2019 is 0.452, placing it at 182 out of 189 countries and territories, and placing it in the low human development category. Gender Inequality Index. Sierra Leone has a GII value of 0.644, ranking it 155 out of 162 countries in the 2019 index. In Sierra Leone, 12.3% of parliamentary seats are held by women, and 20.1% of adult women have reached at least a secondary level of education compared to 33.0% of their male counterparts. For every 100,000 live births, 1120.0 women die from pregnancy-related causes, and the adolescent birth rate is 112.8 births per 1,000 women of ages 15 to 19. Female participation in the labor market is 57.3% compared to 58.5% for men. Multidimensional Poverty Index. The severity of poverty, or the average proportion of weighted indicators in which the poor are deprived, and the incidence of poverty, or the proportion of individuals identified as multidimensional for Sierra Leone in 2017 are shown in the table. As per the table, 6.8% of the people live in multidimensional poverty. As a result, nearly two-thirds of Sierra Leone's population is considered multidimensionally poor. In summary, the relative intensity of economic hardship, which reflects the population of poverty experienced by each poor person, is 57.9%, such that the average low-income person is.
Can you please put it back on the previous slide? The MPI indicators. Thank you. For the MPI indicators, Sierra Leone's poverty assessment has become a priority since the civil war ended in 2002. One of the most essential tools for informing national poverty reduction programs in Sierra Leone is the Integrated Household Survey. The income or expenditure approach, which is the key instrument for analyzing the levels and distribution of poverty in Sierra Leone, has traditionally been used to measure poverty in the country. Non-monetary metrics, on the other hand, have become a significant tool study for study due to the importance of other dimensions in comprehending poverty. As a result, statistics for Sierra Leone has produced a thematic report on poverty and durable goods in 2017, based on the National Population and Housing Census in 2015, which contained the results of a pilot national MPI for Sierra Leone based on the global MPI structure. In 2015, the findings of the measure revealed that 68.3% of Sierra Leone's population was multidimensionally poor. This research served as the first input into the development of Sierra Leone's national MPI, which responds to the national objectives and requirements and strives to measure poverty in all of its dimensions, complementing the country's income and expenditure measure of poverty. Currently, the national MPI of Sierra Leone makes use of the Foster approach, which is a method developed by Al Karen Foster. A state of poverty for each individual's profile is created. This profile reveals which of the groups you belong to. There are 14 signs that a person is deficient based on the national definitions. The deprivations are then combined into a weighted deprivation score for each individual. The weights are based on normative judgment and give each of the five categories equal weight. Education, health, living conditions, energy, and housing are all important factors to consider. Depending on whether their deprivation score is less than a poverty cutoff or meets or surpasses the poverty cutoff, each person is classified as poor or non-poor. The cutoff is 40% of the weighted indicators or being deficient in two or more dimensions. The weighted total of censored headcount ratios, which represented the percentage of people who are poor and deprived in a given indicator, can be used to calculate the national MPI. The MPI may be split down by indicators to demonstrate the composition of poverty because of its structure. The addition of dimensional detail to the analysis adds policy relevance. Furthermore, the MPI can be broken down into subnational population groups like urban and rural areas, regions, gender, age groups, and so on. Sierra Leone's national MPI comprises of 14 indicators and 5 dimensions: health, education, living conditions, housing, and energy. Each dimension has the same weight, while each indicator has a varied weight based on the dimension. For instance, the weight of internet access and bank account in the dimensions of living standards and energy is half that of their indicators. The primary explanation for this pragmatic approach is that while internet connection and having a bank account are vital metrics for measuring Sierra Leone's progress, basic services like water and sanitation remains a top priority for the country, hence have a higher relative significance. Lastly, the MPI utilizes a 40% poverty line. As a result, if a person is impoverished in two or more dimensions or in more than 40% of the weighted sum of indicators, they are multidimensionally poor. The indicators and weights of Sierra Leone's national MPI are listed in the table. Except for Western rural and Western urban, the percentage contribution of each indicator to district MPI exhibits similar trends in the most districts. This is in line with earlier studies which suggest that variables like housing materials and overcrowding contribute differently when comparing the western region to the other regions, as well as when comparing rural and urban areas. Next slide, please. As for the Gini coefficient, Sierra Leone was assessed at 34% by the World Bank in 2011. This is a reduction from the previous year's figure of 40.2%. World Bank estimate data is updated yearly with an average of 37.1% from December 2003 to November 2011. In 2003, the statistics reached an all-time high of 40.2%, and in 2011, it hit a new low of 34%. The Gini index assesses the deviation from a perfectly equal distribution of income, or in some circumstances, consumption expenditure, across individuals or families within an economy. Starting with the lowest individual or household, a Lorentz curve shows the cumulative percentages of total income received versus the cumulative number of beneficiaries. The Gini index is a percentage of the maximum area under a hypothetical line of absolute equality that assesses the area between the Lorentz curve and a hypothetical line of absolute equality. The data are based on primary household survey data gathered from government statistical agencies and World Bank country departments. A Gini score of 0 denotes complete equality, while a Gini index of 100 denotes perfect inequality. According to the World Bank's collection of development indicators derived from officially recognized sources, Sierra Leone's Gini index was 35.7% in 2018. On November 20, 2021, the World Bank provided actual figures, historical data, forecasts, and projections for Sierra Leone's Gini index. Next slide, please. So for this table, it shows the progress of Sierra Leone upon attaining the Sustainable Development Goals, which will be discussed in line with the compliance to the SDG. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. For the compliance to SDG, Sierra Leone is prepared to implement the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. Following its second evaluation in 2019, it is delivering an evaluative third VNR report. SDG 4, which is the education, and SDG 16, climate change, remains as the top priority for the government and as well as the justice. The two goals were chosen as the most important for the state's socioeconomic transformation based on the national development backdrop. The government's Human Capital Development Flagship Initiative, which is part of the country's medium-term national development plan, prioritizes ensuring basic, inclusive, and free quality education from 2019 to 2023. As a result, the national budget allocation to education has stayed at 21% since 2018, ensuring that all public school students have access to basic and secondary education. Free textbooks for core subjects as well as school feedings are done by the Sierra Leone governments. In terms of the latter, the government will supply food for more than 300,000 students by 2020, in addition to development partners' efforts in the same field. This program has benefited 2.5 million students and saved parents an estimated $500 per year beneficiary youngsters in addition to providing free school bus transportation to all district headquarter towns. The gross enrollment rate for primary school has increased significantly, exceeding 135% in 2019 and 2020, compared to 109% in 2018. In addition, the country's progress on SDG 16, which is the justice, is commendable. On the international stage, it continues to lead the G7 Plus, which was granted UN observer status in December 2019 to help the group transition from fragility to long-term development. Sierra Leone also serves as the co-chair of the International Dialogue on Peace and State Building. As a symbol of extraordinary success toward resilience and sustainable development, the country vacated the formal agenda of the UN Peacebuilding Commission configuration in December 2020. On a national level, the government has stepped up efforts to create the proposed Commission of Peace on National Cohesion, with a bill adopted in Parliament to that end. The justice system has made significant progress in improving access to justice for the poor, with the introduction of the Legal Aid Board in 2015. The number of people receiving free legal representation, advice, and related services increased by 93% from 2018 to 413,169 in 2020, including those in pretrial detention and prisons. Child and women's rights, disputes, and criminal cases such as domestic violence, rape, and juvenile offenses were all addressed. Rural communities receive special attention. To support this, the number of magistrates and judges in the country has increased from 63 in 2019 to 77 in 2020. Prioritizing education, which is the SDG 4, and justice, SDG 16, is critical for achieving other goals like the SDG number 1, which is ending poverty, SDG number 2, which is zero hunger, and SDG 10, which is inequality, as well as SDG 3, which is healthcare, and SDG 5, which is sustainable development. For example, boosting the access to justice as a right and a basic need is critical to reducing the country's rural multidimensional poverty rate of 86.3% and income poverty rate of 73.9% respectively, compared to 37.6 and 34.8% in urban regions. Cutting back of school fees on impoverished families will improve their access to fundamental requirements such as healthcare and investment in small enterprises. This is in line with the SDG 8, which is decent work, SDG 11, which is responsible production and consumption, SDG 13, which is sustainable development, and climate change. In addition, gender parity in basic education has been maintained and gender parity in junior secondary school has been reached. In order to localize the SDGs, the government has revitalized district development, coordinating institutions while also scaling up the people's planning process, which incorporates chiefdom and village planning into district and national planning procedures. A variety of efforts have been launched in the area of partnerships and financing for the development of SDG 17, notably informed by the COVID-19 pandemic. So Sierra Leone is currently implementing a strengthening domestic resource mobilization for SDG's financing report, which aims to drive innovation in domestic revenue collection and management at the national and local levels, as well as financial sector capitalization through the use of digitalization and financial literacy. In terms of obstacles, the government has faced diminishing domestic earnings, particularly in light of the COVID pandemic, which has severely hampered private sector operations. In addition to existing measures to better general public financial management, debt relief, and cancellation would be crucial to sustaining SDG finance. Sierra Leone has a growing understanding of the Sustainable Development Goals. The country has unveiled its Education for Development Medium-Term National Development Plan from 2019 to 2023. The people-centered strategy is integrated with the Africa Union Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals to strategically manage service delivery and ensure that no one in Sierra Leone is left behind. Sierra Leone has chosen SDG 4, Education, and SDG 16 as development accelerators based on the estimates that both objectives are critical in the country's transformational trajectory. Basic, inclusive, and high quality education is currently Sierra Leone's most pressing development need. Since August 2018, the government has set aside 21% of the national budget for the Free Quality School Education initiative, ensuring that all children have access to elementary and secondary school education. Currently, all students, including those in distant locations, have free access to core topic textbooks, other learning materials, and better services. The idea has benefited 2.14 million boys and girls in government owned and government aided schools, saving impoverished parents to start small businesses. Since August 2018, the number of students enrolled in primary school has climbed by almost 90,000, while the number of students enrolled in junior secondary school has increased by 10,000. The number of children with disabilities enrolled in primary schools climbed from 26.6% in 2017 to 78.7% in 2018. Sierra Leone hosted the 16th Forum Annual Showcase and the first technical consultation on SDG 16 for Anglophone African countries in Freetown in November 2018 as a global pioneer of SDG 16. As Sierra Leone co-chairs the Global Task Force on Justice, which launched the Justice for All report in The Hague in April 2019, and chairs and co-chairs the G7 Plus and International Dialogue on Peace Building and State Building, launching the Justice for All report in The Hague. The Legal Aid Board's capacity to provide legal assistance to low-income Sierra Leoneans has been strengthened. The board offers legal assistance and representation to rural and underprivileged residents, as well as those in the pre-trial detention and prisons. from 25,000 in 2015 to over 215,000 up to this date. The number of less fortunate people who have access to justice has expanded dramatically. Child protection and land conflicts are among the topics discussed, as are criminal cases, domestic abuse, rape, defilement, and juvenile offenses. The government has given Goal 8 on decent jobs a lot of thought. The country's Complete Decent Work program is currently in place, and it has resulted in the creation of the Labor Market Information System and the National HIV and AIDS Workplace Policy. The initiative has also aided the implementation of international conventions on the abolition of child labor in the United States. In order to achieve SDG 10 on inequality, the government is sponsoring STEM education for females and supporting the First Lady Hands Off Our Girls campaign to stop child marriage and teenage pregnancy. Sierra Leone is ensuring an environmental protection compliance under SDG 13 on climate change through monitoring and other initiatives such as integrating climate change lessons into school and university curricula. Sierra Leone has scaled up people's planning process approach for SDG implementation at the subnational level, putting chiefdom and village level planning at the center of the formulation and execution of all development plans. In terms of achieving the goals, which is SDG 17, development financing is critical for effective development cooperation. Sierra Leone recently completed a development finance assessment that identifies public and private funding options for the SDGs and MPNDP. The DFA will pave the ground for the creation of a national integrated financing framework. Challenges exist in achieving the SDGs in the country, particularly the government's limited budgetary space with a domestic tax to GDP ratio of less than 15%. However, it is good to see that Sierra Leone is still working hard to increase domestic revenue and reduce spending. A variety of structural changes, including efficient public financial management, are in place. Sierra Leone's involvement in the 2016 VNR process demonstrated the country's commitment to reducing poverty, reducing inequality, and increasing prosperity for all Sierra Leoneans. Sierra Leone continues to work toward this goal, and at this year VNR, it renews its commitments.
For our urban and rural population. Based on the graph, for urban population, Sierra Leone's urban population for 2017 was 3,117,881, a 3.19% increase from 2016. Sierra Leone's urban population for 2018 was 3,217,270, a 3.19% increase from 2017. Sierra Leone urban population for 2019 was 3,319,362, a 3.17% increase from 2018. Sierra Leone urban population for 2020 was 3,423,961, a 3.15% increase from 2019. 25% of people living in Sierra Leone live in urban areas, and as such, there aren't many large cities in the country. The Western Area Urban District, which includes the capital and the largest city, Freetown, has a population of 853,651 and a population density of 1,224 people per square kilometers, which the Komainogdugu district in the north has a population density of 21% people per square kilometers. The second most populous city found in the southern portion of the country is Bo, with a population of 223,684. Bo is very diverse and is the home to one of the nation's most prestigious universities. The only two other cities with population over 100,000 are Kenema and Makeni. Next slide, please. For rural population graph, Sierra Leone rural population for 2017 was 4,370,546, increase from 26, a 1.47% increase from 2016. For 2018 was 4,432,879, a 1.43% increase from 2017. For 2019 was 4,493,844, a 1.38% increase from 2018. For 2020 was 4,553,024, a 1.32% increase from 2019. Rural poverty in Sierra Leone is widespread and deep. About 26% of the people are food insecure and cannot afford a basic diet, while 75% live below at the poverty line. Poverty is directly linked to the problems faced in agricultural production and commercialization. Food insecurity is more pronounced in households headed by women than in those headed by men. Widespread regional disparity exists in the incidence of poverty, with rural areas where two-thirds of the population live being the hardest hit. Geographically, poverty is most severe in the eastern part of the country. The main poverty indicators are food insufficiency, poor housing, poor health, high infant and maternal mortality, high illiteracy rate, limited access to clean water, and very low income. Next slide, please. For our agriculture land and employment data. Agriculture land bar graph, according to agriculture land bar graph, agriculture land percent of the land area in Sierra Leone was reported at 54.71% in 2018, according to the World Bank collection of development indicators compiled from officially recognized sources. Sierra Leone agricultural land percent of land area actual values, historical data, forecasts, and projections were sourced from World Bank on October 10 of 2021. The agriculture sector, including livestock and forestry, is a critical component of the economy. It employs about two-thirds of the labor force and according to the World Bank, is more than 50% of GDP. The country is endowed with a favorable agricultural environment comprising arable land, abundant rainfall, and a temperate climate and several rivers with significant irrigation potential that could support the production of enough food to meet local consumption and for export. Next slide, please. Employment data. Most of the country's working age population is in the labor force, and women participate almost as much as men. Over 65% of Sierra Leone's working age population, which represents nearly 2 million people, participates in the labor market. Of those people not working, the difference between men and women are small. 55.7% participation among men, 64.7% participation among women. Most of workers are employed in relatively low productivity jobs in farm and non-farm employment, fewer than wage employment. The vast majority of employed individuals aged 15 to 54 work in agricultural self-employment. Another word is non-agricultural self-employment, mostly in micro-enterprises as traders or shopkeepers. After agriculture, the service sector is the second largest employer at a national scale, although there is significant regional variation. Personal networks are important for the labor market as the majority of the workforce, especially those with the other lower educational attainment, seek and obtain their jobs through family and friends. Next slide, please. Dropout rate for Earl de la Cruz.
Dropout rate chart. Literacy rate. According to UNESCO, Sierra Leone, it has an adult literacy rate of 43.21%, while the male literacy rate is 51.65%. For female, it is 34.85%, showing a big gap between the sexes. Compared to the rest of the country, the literacy rate in Sierra Leone is very low. The literacy rate has increased in recent years. It's indicating a significant gender of discrepancy. A cumulative dropout rate. A cumulative dropout rate to the last grade of primary education, both sexes, in Sierra Leone was reported at 75.84% in 2017. According to the World Bank Collection of Development Indicators, compiled from officially recognized sources, Sierra Leone, a cumulative dropout rate to the last grade of primary education, both sexes, actual values, historical data, forecasts and projections were sourced from the World Bank in October of 2021. The indicators is showing that it's the dropout rate is high in 2016. Longevity and infant mortality. Sierra Leone has one of the lowest life expectancies on the globe. In the average life expectancy in Sierra Leone was 54.3 years. This places the nation among the bottom 5 in the entire world. In comparison, the average global life expectancy is 72.6 years. Sierra Leone faces high rates of infant and maternal mortality. Similar to the expectancy, infant and maternal fatality rates help gauge the quality of the nation's healthcare system. In 2015, 87.1 infants died per 1,000 births in Sierra Leone, while 1.360 mothers died per 100,000 births in the US. Just 5.4 infants died per 1,000 births, and only 14 mothers died for every 100,000 births. Birth-related deaths generally occur when there are delays in women seeking, reaching, and receiving care. All the people in Sierra Leone are at risk of malaria. Malaria is endemic to the nation and possesses a great health risk. In fact, 4 out of every 10 hospital visits in Sierra Leone are due to malaria. Children are at particular risk, and the disease contributes to the nation's high number of child fatalities. However, rates of the illness are falling across the country due to preventative practices such as sleeping under insecticide-treated nets. Earlier diagnosis and treatments also contribute to the lowered rates of illness. By the end of 2020, the Ministry of Health and Sanitation in Sierra Leone hopes to decrease cases by 40%. The Ebola outbreak of 2014 hit Sierra Leone particularly hard. Despite its relatively small population, there were more cases of Ebola in Sierra Leone than any other country. To be exact, there were a total of 14,124 cases in the country, including nearly 4,000 deaths. The first case was reported in May 2014, and Sierra Leone was not declared Ebola-free until February 2016. According to the World Health Organization, the virus was able to spread so widely due to the weaknesses of the healthcare in Sierra Leone. These weaknesses include too few health workers, not enough oversight, and lack of resources. And that is all. Thank you.
Again, I am Catherine Marino together with Mr. Adrian Taller and Mr. Earl Miguel de la Cruz. And that sums up our reporting for Sierra Leone's growth development. Thank you for patiently listening. Have a fruitful day.
Thank you.